Haldeman, and this is the digital tether. If you've ever seen a crime drama, you've seen an ankle monitor. It's that bulky plastic cuff on someone's ankle used to keep them under house arrest. For those outside the legal world, this is known as electronic monitoring. On paper, the objective is clear: provide a high tech alternative to a prison cell that keeps communities safe while letting people keep their jobs. While digital supervision can take many forms, this episode focuses specifically on the two most common forms of tools used today: GPS location tracking and transdermal alcohol monitoring. In this episode, we're going to explore the system through four key lenses: the technical gap in the hardware, the subjective judgment of the officers, the financial burden on the participants, and the generational impact on families. We will examine these issues using two ethical frameworks: virtue ethics, which looks at the character of the individuals in power, and utilitarianism, which asks if the system actually creates the greatest good for society. To understand who is actually wearing these bracelets and the weight of the decisions made behind the scenes, I spoke with Jeanette. Jeanette is a veteran community supervision specialist with over a decade of experience managing high-risk, specialized caseloads. In the justice system, Jeanette is a boots-on-the-ground expert. Her daily duty involves analyzing thousands of data points to differentiate between a technical glitch and a genuine threat to public safety. She sits at the difficult intersection of law enforcement and behavioral health. I asked her about the typical profile of someone on her caseload today and how the reality of her work has shifted over the last 10 years. Here's what her personal experience has shown.
We also now have started in the last few years something called pretrial services. So this is a lot of the DUIs are coming through and they're meth users. They're on alcohol. It's like rare that we even have alcohol users anymore. So we have a few that we have put on EM, which is another kind of controversy. Is that really effective for someone that doesn't, or scram bracelet? Because everyone gets a scram bracelet for, the alcohol, but it doesn't pick up drugs. So what's the purpose of it? So that's another controversial is they need something that is they need to make a bracelet that's going to be able to pick up illegal substance in the body. They haven't done that yet.
This insight from an expert like Jeanette reveals our first major hurdle. The system was originally built decades ago primarily to track alcohol, but the reality Jeanette manages every day is now defined by complex synthetic drug use. This brings us to Mike Steadley. Mike is a veteran probation officer and a specialist in electronic surveillance with years of experience in high-tech monitoring. His role is to design the rules of engagement for people returning to society. I asked him, if he had the resources to change the system, what would he actually need to make it better? Why is it that in 2026, we still don't have the tools that Jeanette is looking for?
Yeah, if I could come up with some kind of system that would detect if marijuana was like an active metabolite, if you were impaired for marijuana, you would be like a trillionaire. You don't have to work any more overtime if you figure that out.
Mike's trillionaire comment highlights a massive investment gap. We spend billions on these tools, yet the specific technology we need most, a reliable way to monitor modern drug use, remains the holy grail of the industry. It's a $1 trillion problem because while alcohol is excreted through the skin in a way we can measure, the biological fingerprint of synthetic drugs is far more elusive for a wearable sensor to catch. Research by Lee and colleagues in their 2021 IEEE Sensors Journal article explains the biological barrier here. These transdermal sensors read your sweat, but substances take a significant time lag to be excreted through the skin, meaning that the data the officer sees is often several hours behind the reality. However, even when the substance is present, the hardware struggles to interpret it. Research by Marquise and McKnight in their 2009 article, published in the Alcoholism Clinical and Experimental Research Journal, highlights a major technical hurdle: The device is constantly trying to distinguish between a substance someone has consumed and environmental alcohol, which can be things like hand sanitizer, hairspray, or cleaning products. This mechanical confusion leads directly to the gaps found in a 2024 study published in Drug and Alcohol Dependence by Robin and colleagues. They found that in real-world settings, 14.5% of the total data was simply missing. And for 16.4% of the time, the system incorrectly reported that a sensor had been removed. Because the system is designed to be a failsafe, it often interprets a confusing chemical spike as a tamper alert. To see what this looks like for a real person, here's a glance at Jeanette's first-hand experience monitoring alerts.
You have to look into why is there a tamper alert. It could be a sock between the device. Could be there'd be a reading, maybe it could be environmental. Like if it's truly alcohol, it's going to slowly go up and then be a steady constant for hours and then slowly come down. Environmental contact, which could be anything like cleaning supplies is a big one. It will do an immediate spike and then it will come down pretty much just as fast. So you have to be able to monitor what are the alerts and are they legit alerts or are they more environmental?
Scientifically, these sensors are cross-sensitive. They react to the Windex on your counter the same way they would react to a drink in your hand. Just imagine for a second that this is you. You're doing exactly what the court asked. You're home, you're sober, and you're just cleaning your kitchen. You spray some Windex on the counter, and 10 minutes later your phone buzzes. It's an automated alert. The sensor on your ankle has just reported a positive for alcohol. To the computer, you've been drinking. To your officer, you've just broken the law. But in reality, you were just cleaning your kitchen. Because the system often assumes the machine is always right, you are suddenly forced to prove your innocence against a fact that isn't actually true. Since the technology has these technical gaps, the protocol often falls back on the human officer's judgment. This is what we call the human filter. In this environment, the machine provides the location or the spike, but the officer has to provide the interpretation of that spike. I asked Mike about the reality of monitoring these high-risk cases, specifically the moments where he has to look past the data points on his screen to understand what's actually happening in the community based on the experiences he runs into with his own cases.
I have a guy he's incarcerated now on bail, but he was put on for a drug delivery resulting in death and was very adamant that he's not involved in any of this. Meanwhile, like the affidavit is like they have the cell phone records, they pulled his trash, like he is dead to rights. But he's on GPS and you could see him legitimately driving from Harrisburg to Philadelphia and then just doing like kind of like a U-turn and going back around. So he's still drug dealing. Like I don't have the proof, but like, common sense tells me he's not staying in Philly. He's only there for 20 minutes. Why are you driving 3 hours for a 20-minute trip? You're drug dealing, so you're not learning anything.
That phrase, common sense, is where we have to apply the lens of virtue ethics. This framework suggests that the fairness of the system depends almost entirely on the character and integrity of individuals in power. If you have a good actor, an officer with high integrity, they might use their discretion to realize a suspicious-looking data point has a perfectly innocent explanation, therefore protecting their participant from a technical error. But if an officer is a bad actor, that same subjective common sense can lead to unfair treatment. Researchers Saunders and Midget, in their 2023 article published in Law and Human Behavior, found that when officers spend less face-to-face time with people, they start relying on heuristics, or mental shortcuts. Their study found that this actually increases racial bias in decision-making. And as Howard and Bornstein point out in their 2018 Science and Engineering Ethics paper, these systems aren't neutral. They often reinforce human prejudice as global truth. Finally, we have to look at the cost, not just in dollars, but in long-term impact on the family unit. Mike explained that being on a monitor comes with a daily fee.
I try not to treat individuals differently, especially like one of the biggest things regarding electronic monitoring is monetary costs. It's very expensive to be on a bracelet. So I think we charge like $15 a day. So for an individual that doesn't have, any money, it's hard for them to get on a bracelet and manage that because it's very expensive.
That's $450 a month. For an individual who is out of work, this represents a significant budgetary challenge. Robin and colleagues in 2024 found that this financial pressure can actually run counter to the program's intended goals, increasing stress and making people more likely to commit a technical violation, which means breaking a rule like failing to pay a fee rather than committing a new crime. But the trap goes deeper than money. Jeanette pointed out a pattern where parents were in the system and now their children are following.
We do see a lot of long-term generational cycles of probation. And like I said, like I've had being here for 27 years, we have parents that have been in the system and now their kids are in the system. Unfortunately, they are brought up in that environment and they learn from that, and that's what they know.
This generational cycle isn't just a statistic. It physically changes the home environment. Jeanette shares a story with me about a juvenile on her caseload whose monitor began reporting he was all over the city at 2 o'clock in the morning.
We actually did a stakeout for a juvenile once because he was literally on a bracelet, and all through the night it was showing that he was going all over town. So we're like, is he actually going all over town? So one night they literally did a stakeout at his house waiting for him to leave the house. So you have to try to figure out, are they drift or are they not? Usually they're pretty easy to figure out because they're few and they're not on a regular pattern. So but if it becomes a pattern, then it's probably not a drift. It's probably them actually leaving when they're not supposed to.
Think about the weight of that. Because of GPS drift, a technical glitch where the signal bounces off cell towers, the police ended up conducting a stakeout outside this child's home. While the boy was fast asleep in his bed, the digital truth insisted he was a fugitive. When the home becomes a site for police stakeouts because the machine is drifting, the boundary between a family sanctuary and a prison cell disappears. Researcher Alana Gunn, in her 2022 article published in the Journal of Community Psychology, calls this a mechanism of stigma. She describes a trauma to prison pipeline where the monitor acts as a permanent label. It creates secondary traumatization where children grow up in a home that feels like a prison, internalizing the identity of an offender before they've even had the chance to prove themselves. To wrap up, I asked Jeanette where she thinks we stand today. After a decade of seeing the friction between these digital tools and the human lives they monitor, she gave me a sobering perspective.
I'm not I'm not a fan of electronic monitoring. I feel like the adult system is about punishment and then rehab. And I was in the juvenile system first, and that's all about rehab and rehabilitation. And unfortunately, a lot of the people we work with, it's the same people. We've had them as a juvenile, and now we have them as an adult. I feel like when you look at someone's history and they've already been through the system as a juvenile and now as an adult, and then you give them another break by not sending them to jail, when clearly the sentencing guidelines calls for incarceration time, but then you let them do that via electronic monitoring. It's just another watered down part of decriminalizing stuff. So, and I feel like there's a huge push of decriminalizing, behaviors.
Watered down. It's a phrase that brings the core of the research to a head. If we look at this through the lens of utilitarianism, we have to ask, is this system providing the greatest good? Think back to Mike's trillionaire comment. The admission that we are still searching for a tool that truly works. We've looked at the evidence of a 15% data gap, and we've heard how a simple household cleaner can trigger a trip back to jail. When the technology is inconsistent, common sense and human bias fill the void. This is what we call an illusion of oversight. Amana Gunn's 2022 research offers a different path, the wounded healer. This model suggests that long-term success might not come from a GPS tracker, but from human mentorship and the support of those who have survived the system themselves. So I leave you with this. As we move further into a world run by algorithms and sensors, are we comfortable trading human rehabilitation for a digital leash that we know is struggling to keep up? Is it enough for a system to be convenient, or does it have to be just? I'm Kaley Haldeman. Thank you for listening to The Digital Tether.